of the supply chain had become a must. Next slide, please, Kenneth. Drilling that down then to the different stakeholders within the airport community, we saw that on the different levels, stakeholders were going to and were preparing themselves to these four major concerns of the pharmaceutical industry. Important to see was that both cargo airport communities, hand in hand with the public border and customs agencies, governmental bodies, had to work together and prepare the entire community and its stakeholders on those four major elements, and this with who were actually requesting a white glove service as such. Next slide, please, Kenneth. In the white paper, we came up with that preparedness is equal to early open communication and collaboration. And this both internally within your company as well as within the supply chain. And the secret to success for that, we came up with the analysis in the second white paper that both dedicated teams, together with a strong collaboration with the vaccine manufacturers, as well as collaboration with the entire supply chain, would be of key to success in order to create this leverage and this platform. Not forgetting that both private and public sectors needed to work around the clock, hand in hand. Next slide, please. Second part in the white paper, we then looked at four air cargo communities that were then showcased, and in which the four task force initiatives shared their best practices, lessons learned, and recommendations were formulated for the entire industry. What the four airport or air cargo communities learned us, both or four of them, Brookure Task Force, the EXCIV Cargo Community Ready Response, the MIAVAC Task Force, and the Changi Ready Task Force, they came up with the fact that you needed clear local air cargo community objectives, equal importance with global collaboration, inclusive organized structures, recognition that first vaccines are just a beginning, and that's what we'll see in the next couple of slides. It's an evolving process where first we would look at the front runners of the industry, but the more we evolve in time, the more we see different other players coming on the market, to which we have to be as flexible today as we were 2 months ago, and then build collaboration and trust. And trust is, I think, one of the key words over the entire white papers that we have produced and the campaign and the project we have run. We had to learn to trust each other in depth to be ordered to come up with a good collaboration platform altogether to tackle this enormous challenge. The next slide, please. Also in the white paper, it's important to know that we have produced fact sheets in the first and the second white paper. We have tried, both organizations, together with the help of Forward Advice and to help with Bert Elsen's great experience with the different pharmaceutical companies, that we have seen the further development of the different vaccines. And as we speak, this slide even changes overnight. What we have seen and what I have seen until today is that still the first three big approved vaccines, AstraZeneca, BioNTech, Pfizer, and Moderna, are the ones that are flying today. If you also look that they are produced in about 12 manufacturing sites over the world, but that there is a high concentration both in Europe and United States, and that they are responsible but close to 6 billion doses of vaccines for the next 6 to 8 months. All of them need 2 therapeutic dosages to get the patient or the person immunized. And these are the 3 that are accepted and approved in quite a lot of countries. Next to that, we have a very important group of vaccines, Sinovac, the Gamalaya National Center, Kansan Bio, Bharat Biotech, Serum Institute of India, and Sinopharm, that are also producing vaccines, are already recognized in certain studies, and are being produced right now. Important to see at the right side of the slide is that there are, while we speak, other vaccines that leave now, I would say, the research phase and go into production for injection into the patient. And that's both Johnson & Johnson and Novavax, as well as the initiative of GSK and Sanofi is taking off quickly as well. If we would count all the doses together, next slide, please. Then what we can take back for the year 2021, looking at the different numbers, what has to be expected is a long way to go, and speed, we have to speed up those shots. Everyone is looking now at the manufacturers, at the countries, how fast can we now finally inject those vaccines into the population. What we can say already is that's about 8.9 billion vaccines will be available over the year 2021. 6.5 billion of those will be produced in the EU and in the United States. While we speak, about 2.5% of the total world population got at least one shot of one vaccine today. So the speed up curve will come in the next couple of weeks and months, where we see definitely a steep climb up in the percentage of populations that are going to be vaccinated. And about 7 billion vaccines are produced by 4 pharmaceutical giants. And then last but not least, my last slide, Kenneth, please. 2021, what to expect? Well, there is a lot of hard work being done right now behind closed doors. About 182 vaccines are in a preclinical development trial against COVID-19. About 74 clinical development, oh, I'm sorry, I don't see the slide, thank you. About 74 clinical developments are in clinical development of those vaccines. And of the 74, 46 of those will need 2 doses to reach immunization. 12 will reach 1 dose to reach immunization. 32% of the 74 are concentrating on a protein subunit, while 26% is concentrating on either DNA or RNA messenger technologies. For your information, that's exactly those vaccines we are getting right at this moment that are especially concentrating on that technology. But last but not least, the different green balls you see spread over the earth, these are all the clinical trials that are going on at this very moment in the different continents of the planet, trying to battle the COVID-19 vaccine, trying to battle the COVID-19 and producing a vaccine. Thank you very much. That was my contribution, and I'm open to any question later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. That was exceptionally great material there. And when you look at your slides where you talk about where the vaccine is actually going to be produced from and the various numbers of vaccines currently under trials or going through into the approval process, it just indicates the scale of the challenge that the industry has ahead of it with regards to the distribution, transport, and logistics. So that's fascinating, and I'm sure as we get questions through that will come through to the chat box, etc., we can actually go through there. So a question that's come through, I've just seen in terms of the source of the data for your last 2 slides. So perhaps, Frank, you can just address that question here.
Yes, of course. These both data, there are 3 different data sources, but the ones I used is WHO, and it's a public web page that you can consult, and in which you see the different vaccine distribution and development numbers, and of course the different data resources from Eurostat that I use as well to analyze these data.
Excellent, and sorry, now I'm going to have a quick plug for Pharma.aero and TIACA members, is that we will also be engaging in information transfer of all that type of stuff through to our respective members. So for those of our listeners out there who aren't actually TIACA or Pharma.aero members today, you should come and knock on our doors, because we have a lot of information we're happy to circulate to you all. So thank you once again, Frank, that was excellent. We now move to module 2. And as Frank so perfectly highlighted there, that there is a complex situation that's evolving with regards to the transport. With only 2.5% of the world's population thus far receiving 1 injection, there's a significant ramp up coming up in the next perhaps 3, 4, 5, 6 months. So how will the industry tackle those particular complexities? we're very pleased now to have three different sector perspectives. First of all, we'll hear from an airline, then we'll hear from a ground handler, and then we will hear from an airport representative. So with that, it gives me great pleasure to hand over to Carlton Llewellyn from Polar Air Cargo to provide us the carrier perspective. Over to you, Carlton.
Oh, thank you, Glenn. And thank you all for having me. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to those of you joining from different parts of the world. I'm happy to share, our perspective and our reflection on the impact of COVID-19. And, it's something that, we all know. If you move to the next slide. So we'll start with our what we know, our perception of what it was going to be and what the reality is, right? So initially we thought this was going to be an isolated incident, only in the Asia Pacific region, because that's where it started. And well, that's where we started hearing about it. We thought it would be for a short time span, no more than about 3 months, would have minimal service disruption because we've seen issues of widespread diseases, but it only had it was only for an isolated time, didn't last that long. PPE production, we thought that there was enough to meet the demand. However, the reality is it turned out to be a global pandemic, which we're still in right now. It is long-term and ongoing. There were significant service disruptions, and there's a lot of inconsistency, which was one of the biggest challenges for us. A lot of inconsistencies port to port in different regulations, right? There turned out to be significant scarcity of PPE. You couldn't find any of this stuff wherever you went. And that led to, network uncertainty, not just for Polar, but for the airline community in general. So next slide. So what did we do to that? As Deming said, it's not necessary to change, right? He also said survival is not mandatory. Of course we need to survive. So we had to adapt, right? Next slide. Next slide. So what did Polar do to that? First thing we did was, we think about, protecting our most valuable resource, which are our people. So we immediately set up temperature check stations. We started distributing PPEs to our employees and their families. None of this was required. As a matter of fact, the messaging on this, globally was mixed, right? You would hear on the news that it's not necessary to wear a mask. However, in other parts of the world, it was wearing a mask was the norm. We moved our office-based folks to virtual work from home virtually, and we staggered our ground staff on shifts. This helped with the whole social distancing effort. We deployed new sanitization procedures. We increased the amount of cleaning that we did in the facility. We went from, from cleaning maybe 2 or 3 times a day, depending on where you were, and we increased it to a lot more. We also did the same for our aircraft, and we did this also with consulting with Boeing to ensure that we were using the right chemicals to do the sanitization. Alternate gateways were also open for our flight crews. This was because of the change in rules. We had to make sure we could mitigate any chance that you would wake up the next day and there was a change in a particular station or a particular country that would end up having crews being quarantined for 10 to 14 days, depending on what the rules were. So we had to make sure that we put measures in place that would mitigate that. One of the most important thing was we developed a robust online connection point for all our employees. And this way we remain engaged. It is important to stay engaged with folks, especially during the pandemic when there's a lot of uncertainty. We as leaders, as a company, need to drive it for them. We continue to adapt. One of the things that we did main thing was we went to IATA. We had our CIV training that was scheduled to happen in 2020, early 2020. And IATA told us that, well, they couldn't do it because they couldn't meet the social distancing requirements. So we asked them, can you develop a virtual training for us? This is the first time it was ever done. And they were able to develop it and deliver it in 2020. TAPA, we had our TAPA virtual certification for our LAX facility. We had already done an on-site certification at CVG, and we wanted to continue that effort, so we ensure that we could do that virtually. Heightened virtual customer interaction and support. We needed to maintain the contact with them so that we can assess what their needs are and meet those needs. And the only way we're going to do that was trying to figure out a way how we can stay connected. Increase humanitarian efforts. It's definitely important that we do what we can to help the community. And what we did on the onset of COVID-19, we coordinated with NGOs to move PPE products into Wuhan, which was the epicenter. We also moved some into Shanghai. And then when the waves started moving back into the US and other parts on this side, we also coordinated our efforts, find PPEs in Asia Pacific region and started moving it back and supplying, folks here in the US as well. Next slide. So lessons learned. I think earlier on today, we even saw this, you're on mute, right? Those are the things because we're in the virtual world, and you may have seen, a guy on YouTube giving a formal deposition, and he forgot or he did not know how to turn off his cat filter, right? These are some of the things that we've learned. In all seriousness, it is important that we continue to invest in technology that's going to help us to stay connected with our employees first and foremost, but equally important that we stay in touch with customers and regulatory authorities, whoever we're dealing with. So it's important that we invest in whatever technology that's going to help make us conduct business easier, especially in these times where social distancing are required. Next slide. So Polar, we continue to focus on the future and invest in our infrastructure. So we had infrastructure upgrade planned for CVG. We did not let the pandemic stop us. We continued that infrastructure upgrade, and we were completed by the end of 2020. We also did facility enhancement at LAX and CVG, and we find that this was to make the workflow better. It also helped us. We identified that it helped us with the mitigating the effects of COVID-19. Cool containers. We invested in cool containers, cooling pads for pharma transport. We maintained and deployed our digital effort. Right. We deployed our dock management system, which is DigiDock, and our online training platform. We continued our commitment to ESG. We purchased and deployed energy efficient vehicles in LAX, CVG, and across other stations in Asia. Next slide. So, a couple of takeaways. This is my last slide, but a couple of takeaways from COVID-19. Regardless of what you're going through, you can never stop communicating. It's important that you communicate, over-communicate, especially to your employees, because they have their personal and professional challenges that they have to deal with in uncertain times. And regardless of that, think of what's going on now as we're dealing with the COVID-19 issues, but it's also important that we continue to keep our eye on the future and continue to move our initiatives forward as investing in whatever investments you have planned the year prior, whatever the case might be. But don't stop those investments just because you're going through a challenge now, because you see, if you deploy those investments, then they'll make you better prepared for whatever is going on in the future. I believe that's all I have, but I do look forward to any questions from the panel later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlton. That was excellent insight as to how you responded to the situation. And I think we actually all owe, again, a debt of gratitude to your crews who were flying in the middle of the pandemic when the rest of us were sheltering at home. You know, your crews and the other airlines out there were actually putting their health on the line each day, that they were flying to bring that PPE in. And some pilots I was talking to have actually been exposed to having to take more than 50 tests, you know, and some of them are quite intrusive, as it were. And I know that that same commitment is going to help us get through the vaccine distribution. So thank you very much again, and please pass that on to your crews. We now thank you, Carlton. We now have the pleasure of moving on to the ground handling perspective. And gives me great pleasure to introduce Paul Cheng here, who's the General Manager for Service Delivery at Hactor. And over to you, Paul.
Okay, thank you, Dean. It's my great pleasure to join this webinar. Today, I'm going to share with you all how we handle the COVID-19 shipments from a ground handler and air cargo terminal operator perspective. Can you still hear me?
Yep, you're coming through perfectly, Paul, perfectly.
Okay. Can you get back to the previous slide? Okay, maybe, okay. Let me give you a little bit background about Hactor before I go through the details, so you can have a better understanding of what we're actually doing in the supply chain. Hactor is a Hong Kong-based air cargo terminal based at Hong Kong International Airport. We handle more than 100 customer airlines, and our customers, our services are mainly focused on aircraft loading, unloading, crew transportation, load control, cargo documentations, and cargo terminal operations. Our aim is to release the first vaccine pilots on every vaccine flight within 1 hour. So in the coming 10 minutes, I'm going to share with you all what are the challenges from a ground handler perspective, how we tackle the challenges, and what we can do, and what are the key success factors to ensure smooth and efficient handling of vaccine shipments all the way from the ramp side to air cargo terminal. Next slide, please. Okay, so what are the challenges that happen? The first one is unfavorable weather conditions. Take Hong Kong as an example. In summer, the weather is very hot, normally more than 30 degrees Celsius. At the ramp side, it's even higher, up to 40 degrees Celsius. So improper handling of vaccine shipments under an unfavorable weather conditions can increase the risk of temperature excursions. The second one is the geographical distance to cargo terminal. Vaccine shipments can be transported by passenger aircraft and cargo aircraft. And passenger apron is normally far apart from the cargo terminal. So if you tow the vaccine shipments from passenger apron to the cargo terminal, actually there's a risk of temperature excursion if you do not handle it properly. The last one is the different packagings. There have been 8 vaccine shipments on the market, and there are some more to come. Because of different packagings, because of different vaccines have different temperature requirement, their packagings are totally different. So from the ground handler perspective, there are active and passive cooling methods. The first one is active cooling method. Vaccine shipments are directly loaded into a cool container, which normally apply for the vaccine shipment, which is between the temperature range of 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. For the passive cooling method, the vaccine shipments are packed with PCM gel or dry ice, and then load into the normal airline pallet. So because of different temperature requirement and different packagings, It's very important that you got have a different procedures to avoid any temperature excursion throughout the handling process. So next slide, please. So how can we tackle the challenges of APEN? We work with Hong Kong Airport Authority to set up a tailor-made vaccine handling procedures, which is we have for every vaccine flight, we have a dedicated parking bay, which is closest to the cargo terminal, no matter it's parked at the passenger apron or cargo apron. So when the machines come, we will unload with priority and tow it directly into our terminal immediately. For the vaccine shipment, which are loaded on normal airline pallet, they will be loaded onto the thermal dolly right after unloading from aircraft, and then immediately towed to the cargo terminal. So for the vaccine shipments, which need to connect to another transit flight, we have the apron shelters at both passenger apron and cargo apron for vaccine a temporary staging, and also to avoid the vaccine from direct radar. Next slide, please. So how is our readiness within our terminal? So our readiness comes from our investment in our terminal facilities, infrastructure, pharmaceutical handling facilities, and re-engineering our whole handling process. We have dedicated truck doors, which are closest to the apron, and which is to facilitate the direct transfer of the vaccine shipment to truck door for immediate release to our customers. We also set up a fast lane. We call it as a golden route, which is a shortest distance and shortest time from the aircraft unloading to storage and hangout. We also have a crew room of over 2,000 square meters with the multi-zones temperatures control systems, which can facilitate different vaccine with different temperature requirements. In our crew room, we also have recharging points for cool containers, and we also provide dry ice for cool purpose. And we also have CCTV to monitor whole handling process under 24/7. And we also have a temperature monitoring systems to monitor any temperature variance around the clock. So next slide, please. So how about our people? We have a dedicated team of staff. They are very experienced and well-trained for handling pharmaceutical products. We have the IRC Pharma and WHO GDP accreditations. They are the assurance of compliances with the best practice and conformity with global standards. We also deployed mobile devices to facilitate the whole handling process from aircraft unloading to the cargo check-in process. Our customers can also log in our company app at any time to get the latest status about the pharmaceutical, the vaccine shipment status, which is a real-time traceability of vaccine shipments from the aircraft arrival through the terminal processing to ready for release. So next slide, please. So finally, I want to sum up what are the major success factors to ensure a smooth and efficient vaccine handling throughout the handling process. Firstly, committed collaborations is very important. We proactively participate with the task force that is set up by the Hong Kong Airport Authority, and we proactively to work with them to set up a tailor-made handling procedure for every vaccine shipments. We believe that a computerized approach with participations of all stakeholders like the government, airlines, freight forwarders, ground handlers, and even shippers can ensure a smooth and efficient handling of vaccine shipments along the whole supply chain. Secondly, it is transparency and advanced informations. With advanced informations from airlines and freight forwarders, all related parties can get well prepared for every vaccine flight. Last but not least, we got to have people, facilities, and procedures ready for handling every vaccine flight. As we know that the major international distribution program has not yet begun. So the capability and the preparedness of the whole supply chain has not yet been fully tested. We should remain focused, remain alert, and remain open-minded to resolve the upcoming challenges and issues. I believe that we should go play a part and we work together to get the job done. That's my sharing from the ground handling perspective. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Paul, for that great insight. And I'm seeing some themes starting to emerge with regards to the focus on collaboration and communication, as well as ensuring that people are at the center of the particular activity. And I have to say, I think that you're having a dedicated parking bays for vaccine flights close to the terminal is an excellent innovation. And I think that just shows how that you've adapted perfectly to the need to make sure that these products are shipped in the highest degree of compliance and without the risk of temperature excursion. So well done on that. So thank you for that. We now have the pleasure, next slide please, Kenneth, of handing over to Emir Pinada, who's the Manager for Aviation Trade and Logistics for MIA, Miami International Airport Marketing Division, who's going to give us the airport perspective. So over to you, Emir.
Thank you, Glenn. It's a pleasure to be with you and everyone on the webinar today. I'm going to be giving you an airport perspective on what we experienced throughout this pandemic over the last few months. Next slide, please. So starting with some of the challenges and potential solutions that we experienced. In the beginning, I'm talking about back in possibly July or August of 2020, there was an unprecedented levels of urgency, expectations, and uncertainty in the air cargo industry. As pharmaceutical manufacturers raced to develop COVID-19 vaccines, the air cargo industry was mostly blind, affecting decision-making, processes, and levels of preparedness. These uncertainties on production timelines, volumes, trade lanes, transportation, and storage requirements, along with travel restrictions and border closures, impacted the industry and, of course, airports. The lack of information was quite challenging, but slowly information began to flow from different sources. And once the question of, is the logistics supply chain ready for the distribution of the vaccine was asked, TIACA, along with Pharma.Aero, formed a joint task force, which became a great source of information for all of us, resulting in 2 white paper reports, several webinars, and media presentations, of which, of course, we're participating in one today. Another major challenge came when the vaccine manufacturers, Pfizer and Moderna, released the temperature requirements of their respective vaccines. The ultra cold temperature ranges needed, particularly the Pfizer one at between minus 80 degrees Celsius and minus 60 degrees Celsius, presented quite a challenge for the supply chain. Airports, including Miami International Airport, scrambled to identify ways to meet these ultra cold temperatures, since we had no facilities that could handle that type of temperature. But as we all know, when more information was made available, the supply chain had solutions available via the use of combination of shipper packaging, active passive containers, on-airport coolers, and dry ice resupply. The demand for infrastructure in our case never developed, since Miami had nearly 36,722 square meters of on-airport cooler space, of which 2,528 square meters are dedicated to pharma. And more recently, Pfizer vaccine temperature ranges are now at the more normal level of minus 25 degrees to minus 15 degrees Celsius. Our airport prepared itself by mapping out all of our available cargo parking positions for aircraft to make sure we could handle any number of scheduled or charter flights dedicated to vaccines. In addition, we identified areas on our land side for truck parking or staging in case the need arose to handle more trucks and limit congestion wherever possible and prioritize vaccine shipments. And lastly, and probably most importantly, we launched the MIA VAC-19 or Miami VAC-19 Task Force, which is made up of both public and private stakeholders, including airlines, ground handlers, trucking companies, freight forwarders, federal agencies, the Florida Department of Health, Miami-Dade County, logistics providers, integrated carriers, along with local associations, with the sole purpose of planning and preparing for the COVID-19 vaccine distribution. The meetings provide information for the community and address local challenges. This community approach has proven quite successful for us, and I'm sure we will hear much more about it later on in the program from my colleagues at the other airports. Next slide. Looking at surprises. For us, the one big thing was dry ice. There are always surprises, those unexpected things you never anticipate or did not plan for. In our case, like I said, it's dry ice. It's not that our cargo community lacks dry ice, but that the entire state of Florida, there is no dry ice manufacturing. We get our dry ice from the state of Georgia and truck it down to Miami. We have multiple distributors locally that supply the local airlines with their dry ice. But the challenge will be if demand suddenly spikes, it will be difficult to supply everyone unless you have pre-ordered or have alternative backup suppliers. In addition, we are exploring the possibility to export dry ice to the Caribbean and Latin America if their supplies run short. The cargo community is working on contingency plans to address these issues, plus others in our community, but this one really took me by surprise. Next slide. When it comes to innovation and adaptability, I'm always surprised with the ingenuity of the air cargo industry. In the past, we have seen incredible feats of air cargo logistics, such as the Berlin airlift after the Second World War, and more recently with the multiple hurricane relief efforts that plague our region here in the Americas, and particularly in Miami and the Caribbean. The COVID-19 global pandemic introduced us to the Praetor flight, taking advantage of the empty passenger deck, filling the seats and overhead compartments with boxes. At Miami, we have several carriers operating such flights, including American Airlines, LATAM, Emirates, and Avianca Cargo, to name just a few. This type of operation has provided an additional stream of revenue for airlines that normally do not operate cargo flights. For us at the airport, this was a completely new type of flight operation, and our ground handling companies adapted quickly, learning to offload the passenger deck quite quickly and efficiently. Some airlines adopted pre-notification processes, initiated confirmation communication that shipments were received and dispatched correctly, and developed enhanced security procedures. Our air cargo community quickly pivoted to operating under the new CDC guidelines of mask wearing, social distancing, extra cleaning of equipment in high-touch areas, as well as reducing employee gathering areas such as lunchrooms and bathrooms. Due to this, the air cargo industry logistics sector was used as an example for the rest of the city and county when it came to reopening offices and warehouse space. Throughout the pandemic, Miami has sustained its cargo operations, actually growing its operations by 10%, ending the year with cargo volumes of up 2.5%, reaching 2.3 million tons, which is a record for us. This is a great accomplishment given the circumstances under this current pandemic. Next slide, please. So some of the lessons learned throughout this process. First, plan ahead. Start planning and preparing early to cover the multiple complexities of the distribution process. Community approach, something we've talked about several times. Be as inclusive as possible to get feedback from throughout the supply chain and make sure to get their buy-in early. Security, an important factor that should not be overlooked. Security should be approached from both physical and cyber perspectives. Be aware and accept many companies will not reveal information about vaccine shipments for security reasons, no matter who you are or who you represent. Infrastructure inventory. Map out your cooler space. Infrastructure takes a lot longer than you think. Business partners, airport stakeholders, and local associations, responses may be delayed. Give yourself enough time to gather the details and then share them with your community. Secure necessary funding for any possible or unforeseen project associated with vaccine distribution, or at least identify funding sources that can be executed rapidly if required. Transparency. Have an open and transparent communication with your air cargo community. Focus on the achievable. Focus on actions that you can accomplish and not those you cannot control or influence. At Miami, we cannot control the volume of vaccines coming into the airport, but we can try and facilitate the process by making our airport as efficient as possible. And finally, the media. The media is always hungry for information, so communicate as much as you can and make sure that it's accurate. Remember that if you don't know something, say you don't know something. Next slide. When it came to investments and operations, due to the large amount of cooler space presently available at Miami at 36,752 square meters, which we use to handle over 62% of all perishables entering the United States, including over 15 million kilos of pharma valued at $3.7 billion, there was not much need by our stakeholders to invest in new infrastructure related to refrigerated space. One thing that did assist our air cargo community in preparing for the distribution of the vaccine was that Miami is an IATA CIV designated pharma hub, with 5 companies currently certified and a couple of others going through the certification process right now. It enables us to better prepare when it came to training and proper handling of the vaccines, since we're already moving large quantities of pharmaceuticals. Having trained personnel on hand that know how to handle high-value products like the COVID-19 vaccine gives companies at our airport an advantage. Finally, what I like to call our secret weapon are federal agents who have the difficult task of clearing cargo every day. Their experience and dedication to making sure all regulatory and security protocols are being adhered to while making sure commerce continues to flow in an efficient manner cannot be understated. We are fortunate that at Miami, we have such a great working relationship with our federal and state authorities and meet with them on a regular basis to address new challenges, and it was no different for the COVID-19. They are part of our Miami VAC task force from the beginning and have supported our efforts throughout this pandemic. Next slide, please. Finally, my key messages. I would like to leave you with a simple formula. First, plan what you're going to do and prepare for change. Things don't always go as planned. Share the plan and proceed to execute it. Evaluate what's worked and what didn't and adjust accordingly. And then do it again. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to you today.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Amir. And I think your presentation just illustrates the absolute importance of community planning and collaborative sharing. And I think your experience with dry ice is a perfect example of that. You know, it's something that we don't necessarily think about every day because the quantities required is not that great. But now, of course, it's critical. And I think you should be congratulated for looking at how you can support your Caribbean neighbors as well if they should have a shortage. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Moving now to the next module, and it's actually part of carrying on the continuing story about planning and preparation. One of the concerns that has been expressed in the commencement of the vaccine rollout was it going to be monopolized by, as it were, the wealthy countries? Were they going to jump in and have pre-orders and pre-commitments, which actually would have secured enough vaccine for those populations, but would have left the developing world perhaps at the back of the queue? Well, some good news, obviously, in the last week, in fact, when we've seen shipments now moving to Ghana, Colombia, and a few others, which is being led by the COVAX facility. The COVAX facility have actually made a commitment to distribute up to 2 billion doses of vaccine this year. But the question that many people have is what is COVAX? How is Unicef, with its global expertise in humanitarian efforts, how is it helping and how is it working with COVAX? What are the plans? What is the initiatives in place to help move vaccine to over 80 countries in the world? And how have they managed to already start achieving some success in that front? Well, we're extremely fortunate today to have with us Munir Buzar, who is the COVID-19 vaccine global logistics lead for Unicef. Incredibly busy, as I think he has numerous shipments in the air almost 24 hours a day. And with that, it gives me pleasure to hand over to Munir, who's going to present to us a little bit more about Unicef and COVAX. So Munir, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Glenn, and good morning or good afternoon or evening, colleagues. It's a pleasure to join you today in this webinar. And again, pleasure to be invited by you, Glenn. So that's a great opportunity for us to also hear, the updates from industry. I mean, even though we're looking at the shipments that are flying around at the same time, but I was listening carefully to hear also about the different experiences from the COVID response, from airlines perspective, ground handlers perspectives. That's definitely useful for us to take into account and hear again the other side of the story. I'm not going to take too much time. I haven't prepared any slides due to some of the constraints of time. And also Glenn made it easier for us just to answer some of the questions that are being asked around UNICEF's role about the COVAX facility, to maybe bring everybody on the same page around what we're doing and how that sort of lines up with all the industry efforts in terms of delivering the COVID-19 vaccines and related supplies, which we tend to forget from time to time, like syringes, devices, safety boxes, etc., and cold chain equipment. So this is very important to take into account as well. So I would like to start first of all by saying that quick introduction. Maybe a lot of people know about UNICEF, and particularly its supply division that is based here in Copenhagen, Denmark. UNICEF is one of the United Nations agencies that has basically a mandate of a number of areas, engagement in health together with WHO, also in other areas such as nutrition, WASH, education as well. And we have been quite heavily involved, I mean, since the beginning of the pandemic, with WHO in the global response with the PPEs, and moved a huge amount of supplies from mostly from China and other parts of the world, PPEs and diagnostic tests and oxygen concentrators. And it was quite a busy year for us last year, and it will continue to be now with the joint efforts with the COVAX facility to deliver the vaccine and devices as well. So with that, I think, considering some of the learnings from the previous year and the COVID-19 pandemic, I think the COVAX facility was initiated as an initiative and also as a financing mechanism in collaboration with WHO, Gavi, UNICEF, CEPI, and a number of partners to ensure basically the main goals of having an equitable and fair distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. And some of you might have heard as well before, is that we go with the basic idea that no one is safe until everyone is safe. So our efforts are basically trying to make sure that the vaccine doses that will be available don't only go to countries that can afford them, but also that we have an initiative that provides different financing modalities to make sure that we also deliver to countries that don't necessarily have the means to afford nor the capacity to secure these doses. And the other goal is also to make sure that we attempt to deliver the 2 billion doses, which will basically cover 20% of the most vulnerable population in each of the countries participating in the COVAX facility. So when it comes specifically to UNICEF and our expertise, I think in terms of our historical engagement with WHO and the global immunization efforts with the different diseases, from polio that we've basically for the first time eradicated last year, and many others that we'll continue our efforts towards the same objective. We have accumulated an expertise in basically leading the procurement and the delivery to not only developing countries, but what we call them in the low and middle income countries in general. And it's important to highlight that UNICEF traditionally procures around 2.5 billion doses already on a yearly basis, excluding the COVID-19 vaccines. So this is basically an additional volume that we'll have to handle in addition to what we traditionally manage on a yearly basis. And that places basically UNICEF as one of the largest buyers of vaccines globally. So how, in terms of logistics, I mean, of course, we don't only procure them, but we deliver them for decades. But considering the increase now of the volumes that would be due to the COVID-19 vaccines, we found it relevant to, as part of our global preparedness for the vaccine distribution, not only for us, but including the whole supply chain with manufacturers, with logistics industry, but more in a focus on logistics. I think it's important to highlight that we have been working on preparing for this since, I mean, the Q4 last year, around October, where we had a strategy together with the COVAX facility with different scopes and accountabilities of each of the partners. And UNICEF was designated as the procurement coordinator for all the 190 countries, as well as a procurement agent for around 120 countries, so that we would be actually procuring for and delivering to. And then to reinforce our logistics setup, which is already well established, we found it relevant that we need to engage maybe a level further with logistics industry, which is one of the reasons why we had, as you might have heard of in our engagement with the World Economic Forum, together with the top 50 logistics companies that were part of that forum. And we have a charter that has been signed by the top CEOs from these companies operating in different fields in the whole chain, from airports to airlines and sea freight carriers to ports, etc. So that is one of the things that we have basically achieved, to have that additional backup and support whenever that is needed, which turned out to be quite useful. The other element, also part of building the capacity for logistics, and Glenn is very well aware of that since we have worked on this together in the beginning as part of the IATA facilitated webinars with the airline industry, where we have developed the concept of the UNICEF Humanitarian Air Freight Initiative to all airlines who basically were interested to support, and we opened the door for them to support through our commercial engagement as well as partnership engagements for in-kind donations, etc. So I think to date we have around 20 main airlines that are part of the initiative, and they have signed these MOUs with us, which is in quite a record time. And this has been in place already back in February. And this again shows, you know, like from the flights that you have seen landing in the different countries, like within a week, for example, we have delivered like 10 million doses that were initially available to 12 countries. And we're aiming to deliver another, in total 14 million doses by the end of this week. So we're working hard on that. And that just shows that in normal circumstances, we would have struggled to deliver such volumes to such destinations with such a short amount of time. And that is definitely a proof that these preparedness measures and collaboration with logistics industry is bringing its fruits. And again, this is just the beginning. And of course, the challenges will continue to be there, but we're really confident that with the responsiveness that we're getting, the support that we're receiving from the different logistics counterparts, is going to make it a lot easier for us to make sure that we deliver on our goals and commitments. I think in terms of vaccines that will be distributed, it is important to highlight that now, as part of the COVAX facility, maybe there would be some others initiatives afterwards. The main criteria for us to engage in the distribution and procurement is that the vaccines need to be WHO approved. And then we have already 3 vaccines that have received WHO EUL, and these are the ones that we are already procuring and delivering to countries. And obviously, as more others based on the Unicef open tender are approved and based on the offers, then we will of course engage with the next rounds of manufacturers that will have also their vaccines approved. So that's quite important. So as I mentioned, maybe the last point before we conclude, and just wanted to be very brief here. We, again, as part of the objectives is to deliver 20% of the population, considering that we only have maybe 3 vaccines ready, and then more vaccines will be approved over time. As you know, I've seen in one of the previous presentations that there are vaccines in the pipeline that will be approved throughout the year. We foresee that there will be an increase in capacity of production, which is at the moment the main bottleneck, and same as we had with PPEs and other COVID supplies last year. It usually starts with building up capacity because we face a situation of over demand, or where demand definitely exceeds the supply. So that's why we have that allocation mechanism that is governed by WHO, and I'm pleased to inform everybody that the first round of allocation has been made public already yesterday on WHO and COVAX websites. And that basically is a mechanism that regulates the availability with the demand, so that we make sure that in every single round, we deliver on our commitment of equitable and fair distribution to all countries that are ready to receive these vaccines. So that is basically the my 10 minutes. And again, I'm glad we have been given the opportunity to present and also to listen to some of the presentations. And yeah, thanks a lot for that.
Excellent. Thank you, Munir. And I think I'm just going to reiterate a couple of things. I really like what you said. Equitable and fair distribution, I think, is tremendous. And, you know, everyone is safe, or no one is safe until everyone is safe. So I think you should be congratulated. I know it's an incredibly busy time that you've had in the last umpteen months, and it's going to be incredibly busy for the next few months. But it's really heartening to hear that you're talking about millions of doses being shipped to dozens of countries, which is actually really then going to help, you know, tackle this particular problem. So thank you so much for the time you've taken today. And also thank you not just for the work that UNICEF does for the COVID vaccine, but for the work that you do year in, year out in terms of distributing vaccines. And we work very closely as an industry together with you to make sure that those vaccines and the planned vaccination programs can hopefully resume, because they've also been somewhat impacted by the last 12 months. So thank you very much for your interventions today. Really appreciate that.
Thanks to you again, everyone.
Thank you. Right, now it gives me great pleasure to hand the microphone over to Stephen Pullmans, the TIACA chair, who's going to moderate an excellent panel that's going to try and bring together all of the various topics that we've heard about today, together with their very unique perspectives of being really in the heart of this, this particular issue so far with regards to vaccine distribution. So with that, I say hand over to Stephen and thank you.
Thank you very much, Glyn, and thank you to the earlier speakers. I think they have already done a great job, and with this panel, we will try to add something to it. I think that everybody who knows me has already understood that airport communities is something that I have valued very much in the past, and which I still do today as chair of TIACA. TIACA is a global cargo community. There are a lot of local cargo communities. So it gives me great pleasure to have three very valued, I should say, old colleagues from me, airport colleagues, joining this panel. JC from Singapore, Nathan from Brussels, and Trevor from Edmonton. So I look very much forward to hear from you guys on the air cargo communities. And I also would like to congratulate you already on the great job you have done on the pharmaceuticals, but also in the different projects that we did together as TIACA and Pharma.iro. We have limited time, but if there are any questions from the audience, I have the Q&A box open. I keep an eye on them. So do not hesitate to drop any questions in that one. And if we can fit them in, I will try to fit them into the discussion. If not, rest assured that we will try to answer them later on or bring you in contact and see what we can do. Let me start by saying that all three of you represent an air cargo community in airports, but you guys are also industry leaders, industry experts. So I would also like to appeal a little bit on that role. So any views you can add and any experience you can share with us in this discussion, do not hesitate to give that extra value that you can give to the audience. And my first question would be one for all three of you. And that would be, can you give me a little bit more, and when I say me, the audience, a bit more information about your cargo community? Was it organized specifically around the topic of the COVID vaccines? Do you already have like a community for a long time? Is the airport leading it? Is it more like an independent formal organization? What is kind of setup that you have at your community, and since how many years is this going on? And JC, if you don't mind, I would like to start with you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Stephen, and morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. So when it comes to pharmaceuticals, I think back in 2017, I think even before that, Singapore has been a leading biomedical hub. So we do have a very vibrant and thriving biomedical manufacturing sector in Singapore. And it's very important that both the air as well as the ocean industry are well supporting this industry. So back in 2017, we have set up this community called Pharma at Changi initiative, where we actually round up all the CIV certified or going to be certified companies to come together to have a very regular dialogue to address some of the pain points that we are seeing in the Changi Air Cargo Hub and how we can collectively address these pain points. Now, coming back to the COVID-19 vaccines, I think we all recognize that effective distribution, transportation, and rollout of the vaccines would be a means to end the pandemic. And I would say that this is a very important and critical humanitarian logistics mission of our time. So I think earlier on, some of the presenters have also touched upon that late last year, when we recognized that some of the vaccine candidates are going to the later stage of the clinical trials, and that information was still emerging. In fact, back then, several months ago, there were still many uncertainties and many unknowns. And it was quite natural and quite obvious to us that, we need to come together, as a community to come and openly share information and to address some of the challenges that we could be meeting in the future. So that is when we go back to the Pharma at Changi community, it was an unanimous decision that we set up not just a private task force, but a public and private task force, where we also involve the various agencies, including customs, border control, and even airport police, to come together to identify some of the potential bottlenecks or risks that can take place across different cargo flows and across different temperature scenarios. So I think as of now, I think we are very heartened that as a community, we have managed to create transparency of our airport cold chain capabilities and capacity. And at the same time, we have also looked into refining some of the operational SOPs and processes to ensure safe and reliable handling of the vaccines.
Okay, thank you very much, JC. That's already a very detailed and good answer. Thanks a lot. Maybe one quick question to add on that one. A lot of work has been done when it comes to the information sharing, tackling the first issues. Do you believe that your group around this COVID vaccines at the airport, will it stay as active as it was in the beginning? Do you expect even an increase, or do you think it's going to more settle down a little bit and be ongoing?
I would say that, right, with every vaccine that shipment that we handle, there are new learnings for us, right? So after every vaccine, we actually go back to the community to see what we could have done better and how we could actually improve the handling and the transportation of the next shipment. And to your question, right, whether there would be potential bottlenecks in the future, I think at this juncture, I would like to say that we are still in early phases of air transportation of the vaccines, whereby it is still very much led by production and supply rather than demand. So as such, I think especially in Asia, what I'm seeing is that there are frequent shipments, but each shipment is actually quite small shipments, which we have more than enough capacity and of course, capacity to handle the shipments.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, JC. Trevor, what's the situation on your side of the ocean?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And similar to some of JC's comments, earlier on, we established our cargo community in 2018-19. So we hadn't already established CIV community on the ground in Edmonton. So we were fortunate enough being a part of the joint task force between TIACA and Pharma.Aero to use some of the lessons learned early on. So in the fall of 2020, we looked to bring together a community in Edmonton, starting with an internal focus around the strengths and weaknesses that we had within our airport community, and to identify what we had, what we needed to improve upon. From a top-down approach internally, we started to map out a plan how we needed to prepare ourselves for the handling of vaccines, and understanding where our weak points were, but also understanding where our strengths were. With that, we reached out to our CIV cargo community and also had a strategic external outreach to all our stakeholders, letting them know our position, our capabilities, and our ability to collaborate, also to let them know what our intent was with the reach out, and to know how this was all going to happen was understanding how the national, provincial vaccine rollout plans were going to take place. So it was a bit of a juggling act, understanding what accurate and timely information was coming in, how we could communicate that and use that effectively at a local level to ensure that as vaccines come in, we could play our part to help get them out to the local communities and regions here in Alberta. So for ourselves, I think the role that we saw was leaning on our strengths and expertise from our CIV community, but also understanding where our gaps were in the vaccines when they would come. So the plans that we had in place and the lessons learned that we have, and some of the findings that we had from the joint task force, we applied all those resources to our vaccine rollout plan and how we could effectively support it.
Okay, thank you very much, Trevor. Nathan, don't blame me for putting you last, but as an old colleague, I don't give you any benefit of the doubt putting you first. But please share your experiences from Brussels.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Similar to what Trevor and Jay-Z have shared with us, also at Brussels Airport, we have started building our community very early on. We established Air Cargo Belgium many years ago already, where we brought the community together in order to improve the overall handling, the efficiency of the pre-cargo area, and the cargo handling, and specifically for the pharmaceuticals and life sciences shipments. We also there, we brought together the community around the CIV certification program. We built a lot of direct connections and dialogue with pharmaceutical shippers early on. And as a result, we established ourselves as a preferred pharmaceutical gateway in Europe. Building on those strengths we already had, we established already before the summer a local procure task force, specifically aiming at identifying the requirements for the vaccine handling, the COVID vaccine handling, even increasing the dialogue with the pharmaceutical vaccine producers in order to get a good understanding on what the specific needs would be for the transport of those sensitive shipments. It helped us in identifying the challenges we needed to face as a community, but also as not just locally, but as a global community. What type of changes had to be made to the standard processes? What type of integration needed to be put in place between the different operators of the pharma handling facilities, and what weak links needed to be eliminated. And I think building on that, we managed to bring together the community, and so far we have handled close to over 15 million doses of COVID vaccines shipments already. It's mainly an export activity of production that took place in Europe to more than 40 destinations. So a good start so far.
Okay, thank you very much, Nathan. It's good to see that the three of you, when answering that all of three say it's about info sharing within the community, but it's also being stronger in gaining info, especially from the shippers and governments, but that it's also about setting up common procedures, and it's not just talking, but also really acting on it. So that's really good to hear. Emir made this great example of Miami finding out on the dry ice capabilities within the region. Is this something that you noticed in your region as one of the issues as well? And if not, what are the main issues that you have encountered? And I also think, for example, when you talk about customs and regulations, has this been a great burden? Maybe JC, if you could give us some info on that one.
Okay, I think here at Changi Airport, I think the main flows that we are handling right now are essentially imports flows, as well as air transshipment flows. So for imports, right, based on the SOPs that we have set up with our customs and the various authorities, once the shipment arrives, it will be processed quite quickly by our cargo handlers, and it will be cleared customs and border control expeditiously. When it comes to transshipment, I would say that given Singapore's extensive air connectivity as well as the minimum fast connecting time, right, we have been chosen as a preferred transshipment hub, so that the entire transportation time is within the specified transportation time by the shipper and the freight forwarders. So as of today, we still do not see that there is an imperative need for dry ice refill. I'm talking about passive packaging here at Changi. But notwithstanding this, even months ago, together as a community, I think we have prepared ourselves. All our key stakeholders have secured partnership with the dry ice suppliers in Singapore. In fact, just to share, one of our cargo handlers sets even have their own in-house capability to produce their own dry ice up to about 4.5 tons a day. So I think when it comes to dry ice, I think we are equipped and we are prepared. Coming back to your question, Stephen, about the customs and border control, I think I'd just like to add that so far, the key buyers of the vaccines, right, are governments, right? And these are pretty high profile shipments. And they have been, I would say that there are pressure on the customs and the border control authorities to deliver in an expeditious way as much as possible. So I think over in my region, I have not heard of any jurisdiction that they have having experience encountering problems with customs authorities.
Okay, thank you very much, JC. Trevor, I just quickly Googled and I see that it's still below zero for you temperature-wise. So it sounds strange to ask you about the dry ice and keeping things cold. But what have been like the main challenges for you, dry ice, customs, other ones that you had to face or tackle?
Yeah, so touching on some of our challenges, I think early on, one of the key areas we identified was, and again, how we embrace winter here in Canada, and much like unlike other parts of the world, here sometimes it's about keeping vaccines warm. When we talk about remote and as an access as a gateway to Northern Canada, Edmonton has long-standing had a lot of expertise in handling pharma going to the far north in extreme temperatures. However, one of the gaps that we identified early on was having an ultra deep cold freezer on site on airports. So early on, we internally identified that we needed to obtain one to be able to have as a tool, either as a backup if vaccines couldn't get on a flight timely, to be stored, the Pfizer vaccine to be stored at that time. So we obtained one and put it into one of our certified CIV facilities to be able to help manage that and close that gap. So as cold as it is, we did still need that consistent and reliable resource to put in place. And with that, we also said to our external stakeholders that if this resource was needed elsewhere in remote regions, or it needed to be moved or transported in any way, we were definitely open to doing that to ensure that we had that available. Tackling the idea, around the government and the customs piece, we haven't yet seen any issues on that. I think the challenges exist more on the local level, so on the provincial or even the state level, how to get the vaccines in the last mile and the organization of getting the vaccines from the airport to either the hospitals or the clinics where they're going to be measured. That's where I see some of the challenges existing now, not the airport to airport handling. It's more of the last mile handling where some of these challenges and some of the planning is really coming down to the local governments and municipalities to help manage. So we're identifying what has worked, and we'll put plans in place with our CIV community experts to ensure that we can play our role in help managing that.
Thanks, Trevor. Nathan, I think everybody by now understands that we are running a marathon, not a sprint, and that the whole vaccine distribution really still has to kick off. You mentioned already a significant number of flights that you have operated. How do you look at it capacity-wise? And then I think from Brussels, because you are a main gateway when it comes to pharmaceuticals, but also with your experience globally and as chairman of Pharma.io, is air cargo ready infrastructure capacity-wise to take up this challenge in the months to come?
Well, I think there's a couple of elements to answer that question, Stephen. First of all, there's the airport communities themselves that have to make sure they have the right facilities available, equipment, trained personnel. I think we've all had a lot of time now to prepare, and there has been a lot of good quality information sharing through, among others, the Sunrays project, Pharma.io, TIACA. So I hope all airport communities have been preparing themselves, identifying potential weak links. What we do expect and what we do see today is that we're just at the beginning of the global distribution. Production is still very much concentrated, so there will be more production sites coming online, but also more of these vaccines will need to be flown all around the world. We expect a big increase in volume actually in end of this quarter and the second quarter. Definitely there will be a lot more production taking place and a lot more uplift. So there we come to the airlift capacity, and that's something we saw in the beginning. A lot of airlines had to change their procedures, change the certification of their aircraft to uplift more dry ice. I think there's a big responsibility for the airlines to make sure they're ready, and then for the forwarders to work with the airlines to have the right connectivity into all those different remote areas. And as Trevor already indicated, making sure once the shipments arrive at destination that they can be correctly stored, handled, and distributed further on in the last mile. And that's where we definitely still hear a lot of concerns from shippers because that's not going to be easy. Let's be clear about that. There will be plenty of challenges to be tackled in that area.
So if you are in charge of global vaccine distribution, how well would you sleep at night on a scale from 0 to 10? How confident are you?
Well, I would say on the main air cargo routes, I think we're very well prepared. In the big airports, I would say probably now, and this was different a couple of months ago, but now we're probably at 9 out of 10. If we look at more remote areas with less developed facilities, because there was simply less pharma handling in the past, I think there's still a lot of work to be done. So let's be clear. I think these airport communities can use our help. We're there to offer support, to offer guidance, and to make sure that these vaccines can be safely distributed to the final consumer. But there I would say there's still some work to be done. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Nathan. It's already time. But I'm going, and I know that Glyn is going to sit on my back, but I'm going to abuse my function as chair to ask one more question and take a bit of extra time. JC, if you can give one good advice to anybody listening, any airport or any community or people who are still wanting to set up a community, is it still worthwhile to do it? What advice can you give them, and how can you reach out to them? What would you like to tell them?
I think definitely. I think it's not too late to still start your own air cargo community. I think it's very important that as a community, we set common goals and objectives so that everyone is aligned. And it's also very important that we be inclusive, that we do not miss out any key stakeholders. And last but not least, try to advocate and promote an environment where encourage open communication.
Thank you, JC. Trevor.
Yeah, no, off basically what JC had said, I think we need to share good information, trustworthy information, trust your supply chain partners, communities, CIV communities, be willing to open up and share good practice. This is really our time to shine as an air in the supply chain. I think really the ability for us to share good information and share lessons learned and really open the dialogue to ensure that everyone gets that good information. And again, it's never too late. And I think, as you suggested, it's a marathon. So we're going to go through peaks and valleys of challenges, and we need to be able to open up and share that information with communities worldwide.
Okay, thank you very much, Trevor. Nathan?
Well, on top of that, I would say instead of just aiming for good, aim for great with your community. Make sure that you use this moment of global crisis as an opportunity to push some changes forward, to push some innovation and convince your community to take those steps that perhaps a year ago were very difficult to take, but today innovations such as digitizing the whole supply chain, let's use this crisis as an opportunity to push those changes forward.
Okay, thanks you, Nathan. JC, Trevor, Nathan, always a great pleasure to talk to you, to listen to your great ideas and comments. So thanks a lot, and I wish all three of you and your airports and airport communities a lot of good distribution of vaccines to the benefit of everybody. And I give the word back to Glyn. Glyn, thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And it was a wonderful panel. So in actual fact, I think you did a fantastic job. And that last question did a great job of actually summing up. I mean, I was just going to come in and say, I think this whole webinar has really reinforced the need for three strong C's, which is you build a community, you open and have transparent communication. And it's only through that activity you then can truly collaborate together. And it's collaboration which is going to be critical when it comes to moving vaccine. And I think, as Nathan said at the end there, but it's how we should be doing business anyway going forward. So one hopes that we can at least take a modicum of silver lining and positive out of the disruption of the last 12 months and move forward with a very positive collaborative engagement. So next slide, please, Kenneth. I would like to, at this stage, thank all of our sponsors. Again, Polar Air Cargo, Hactal, Miami International Airport for their great support, for all of our speakers, for all of our attendees and participants that shared their time with us today, to Rachel and Kenneth and to the others who've actually helped put all the materials together and made this work so seamlessly. A reminder to please keep in touch and continually monitor the pharma.aero, TIACA websites for looking at the information with regards to Sunrays, look at the documents that have been produced and fantastically presented by Frank earlier on. Here are just some upcoming activities from the TIACA side. Again, all the information is on our website. And with that, I wish everybody a safe and great afternoon and keep well. And thank you very much on behalf of Pharma.aero and TIACA for joining us today. Bye-bye.